Good afternoon, and thank you so much for coming on to this session. For those who have not met me, my name's Tim Ketton Locke. Norman Peale is often attributed with the phrase, if you shoot for the moon, if you fail, then you'll end up among the stars. And the idea behind Norman's quote is, if you aim for something big and lofty, if it all goes wrong, if it fails, we'll end up with something really good anyway. Something which will help the business, something which will change the business. And it sounds a really plausible way to run the business. We aim for something big and lofty, and if it all goes wrong and it doesn't work out, we end up with something good. But the problem with that approach is to get to the launch pad and to get to the moon, we need lots of money, we need lots of time, and we need, most of all, lots of people. And when you take lots and lots of people, and you take lots and lots of time, everyone gets excited about what you're about to deliver. And when everyone's excited about the big, shiny thing that's going to solve all your problems, everyone wants to know about it. Everyone wants to join your team. Everyone wants to be there helping you deliver. And also, senior people want to know about it. And when senior people want to know about it, they want to make sure that it's not risky what you're doing. So they say what we should do is more governance and more process. And we should make sure that we go to scrutiny. And they look at what we're trying to deliver and we make sure that it's all okay. But it's fine because we're aiming for the moon and we're aiming for something big and lofty, and it's all going to be good, because if we fail, we'll be among the stars. So we go off and we produce Gantt charts and forecasts, and we get project managers to produce requirements documents, and we start producing lots and lots of paper. And we keep piling up the paper because the paper makes us feel good because we're doing something, but we're not getting to the launch pad. We're just producing more and more paper. And when we go and speak to the senior people and we explain what we're going to be doing and we're going for the moon and when it's going to be good because if we don't get there, we'll be among the stars, they nod and they smile and they say, that's really great. Do you need some more money? Do you need some more time? You need to go through scrutiny. You need to go through more governance and more process. So you arrive at the scrutiny team and you say, hi, I've come to do this great idea, and what we're doing, we're trying to get to the moon. I've got this great thing, and if it fails, it's fine because we're going to end up among the stars. And they look at it and they think the spotlight's on them, and they think, well, if I approve this and it gets through the other side and it goes wrong, ooh. So they get out their fine-tooth comb and their magnifying glass and they look at the documentation and they say, the paragraphs aren't quite aligned and the I's aren't properly dotted and the T's aren't properly crossed. So you need to go back and you need to do things again. So you go back to your team and you say, well, what we need is we need some more forecasters because the forecast isn't any good anymore, and we need some more schedulers and we need some more documentation, and you produce more and more paper. And as the paper starts piling up, and as the scrutiny starts piling up, more and more people want to come and join your team. And you think this must be a really, really great thing. And everyone's excited, and everyone's got their hopes in this. And they're saying, we are going to transform the way in which we work. We just need to deliver the big, shiny thing. And as you go through the planning cycle, and as you use up the resources, you suddenly start realizing that people are leaving your team. People aren't flocking towards where you're going any longer. And people are going and leaving towards something else. And you look up and you realize there's a problem. There's another shiny thing which is further down the line. And the weeks which you thought you were going to take to deliver it, it turned to months. And the months have turned to years. And you're 3 years and all you've got is a massive stack of paper. And you go to your board and you say, I've got this great idea, and if it doesn't work, we're going to end up among the stars. And they go, we need to stop this work because we found this other idea which is shinier than your idea, and in fact, it's taken on your idea and added a bit more. And we're going to go with that idea. But we don't want to lose all your good work. We want you to write a lessons learnt document. And we want you to pull that together, and we want you to give it to the new team because they're going to deliver something amazing. So you spend the next few months writing that documentation. You spend the next few months polishing it and making it look good. And you take it to the seniors, and they look at you and they say, excellent work. You have become the pathfinder for Moonshot 2. You are the person who's going to deliver and make sure that we succeed where others have failed. And everyone around the table smiles and they nod and they're excited about where you're going. But as you hand the document over to the new team, they put it on a shelf. They don't want to look at that document. They've got some of your team already embedded in their team, and they're more senior now. So why do they need to look at that? They're not going to make the foolish mistakes you've made. They're just going to sit there and do things afresh. It's a greenfield site where things go right. And they're aiming for the moon too, and if they fail, they're going to end up among the stars. These programs, I don't know where you work, but from my experience of industry, my experience of working in the public and private sector, is they're all too common. We have these great ideas that are going to solve all our problems, and nothing comes to the end apart from a big pile of paper. In 2022, there has to be another way, said the second Permanent Secretary, Lawrence Lee. He said, we need to get to outcomes quicker, and we need to deliver things that can be shaped and changed. And the DX4D program was stood up. I want to talk to you about 3 lessons from that program, and hopefully they'll be helpful and applicable to what you do, and then we should hopefully have some time for questions at the end. The first lesson that I wanted to talk to you about was around deliver something early that can be changed rather than perfection that can't. It seems counterintuitive to deliver things early into projects. We want to perfect what we're doing. We don't want to show people our homework. People realize that we make spelling mistakes or we haven't got alignment properly right, and therefore we want to keep everything to ourselves, and we spend weeks and months perfecting a document. But when we perfect the document, it's only perfect to us. As soon as we give it to someone else, it's not perfect to them. And they want to change it, but they're changing perfect. So you're then in a battle with them to try and work out how you compromise, how you get to the end solution. What we found in DX4D was if you put something on the table early on and deliver it as a minimum viable product or a proof of concept, and then let the user shape that concept, then you end up with a far greater product. One of the outcomes that we are trying to get to in DX4D was increasing the availability of platforms, speeding up procurement, and creating interoperability. And these were delivered by DNS in Bristol under Andy Start, and looking under 3 centres which they're working there. So we had the Battlefield Integration Centre, which was trying to create interoperability and integration by default. The Engineering Centre, which was looking at trying to accelerate the procurement time by up to 50%. And the Availability Centre, looking at trying to increase platform availability by up to 50%. And when we were working with the team there and the availability, what they said was we're going to go through one platform at a time to learn the lessons and then apply them across the rest of the business. Rather than take the whole of the defence enterprise and transform that and improve it all, which is perfection, they were trying to do one at a time. And the advantage of that was meant we could shape and change the way in which we were delivering and the outcomes which were there. It transpires that if you increase the availability of a platform, that's one thing. If you increase the availability of a platform, but it's not available to use, so for example, you don't have a trained personnel to go in it, or it's deployable by itself, but it needs other equipment to go with it, then it's not very useful. So we also looked at readiness, so available and ready to deploy. And the readiness system created with MSHQ and working alongside them saw them as a direct output, an interface between what the availability center was producing and what the readiness center was producing. And by sitting down and doing one pathfinder, one proof of concept that you could actually increase the availability of one platform and then speaking to the end users, it was quite clear that readiness was high on the agenda. And that pivoting towards that meant that we didn't spend lots of time and lots of energy perfecting all 300 odd platforms that we've got, but just one before we pivoted towards a different outcome. The first lesson from the program: deliver something early that can be changed rather than perfection that can't. The second lesson is about bringing together people early on. There's an African saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we found that a lot of people want to go fast, but they end up becoming quite alone in what they're trying to deliver. A typical cycle of what happens is they get given a requirement to go and deliver something, and 8 months to deliver that requirement. And the project manager can sit down and spend a lot of time polishing that requirement, and they feel like they're making excellent progress over the first 2, 3, 4 months. The documents are coming together and the pile of paper is getting higher. As they move into the last 2 or 3 months, the pressure starts to tick up, and they suddenly realize that they need commercial, financial approval, analysis, and scrutiny. And that final month becomes compressed. And as the scrutiny becomes high and the pressure becomes high, the project either ends up delayed or getting through and then failing at the other side. We found that a different approach of bringing people into the room early on allowed you to collaborate and allowed you to drive at the outcome, allowed people to see what the problem was you were trying to solve and understand it. And then when you understood the problem, trying to work at a solution together, you brought everyone along the journey with you. Not only did it deliver things quicker, faster, and better, but it also meant that we didn't have this gated procedure of sequential delivery that's typical. One example of that was around the government-furnished equipment. The Defence lends out equipment to suppliers, and they look after that equipment and allow them to do testing on that equipment. But they also then need to report back to us about how that equipment's being used on a quarterly basis. We got tasked in the DX4D team with looking at how you could speed up that analytical process in the middle, which was looking at how the results were going through. And it was taking around about 3 months to go through all these lines of data that were coming back in. Unbeknown to us, at the same time, there was a team looking at the portal side, how you streamline the data, standardize it coming in the other end. And also industry were looking at how they utilize that data at the other end for their supply chain and also their assets. By bringing 3 groups together into one room, we'll then be able to look at the interfaces between them and how you had a handoff between the standardization of the data, the processing of it in the middle, and then how it was then utilized by industry. We made sure that was more seamless than it was previously envisioned. And the outcome meant that the individual parts, which would have been reasonably good, were actually multiplied by that collaborative working together. Bring people together early will deliver an outcome faster and more effectively than if you do it alone. The final lesson, and probably one of the most important lessons of the DX4D program, was about moving resources towards the most promising priorities. Moving resources towards the most promising priorities. I think when it comes to delivering capability, we found there was a couple of things that stopped us doing things as a DX4D team. We were very small. There's about 16 people in our greatest capacity, and then about 10 we were working with as a core on a daily basis. And some things which came to us, while they were great things to look at, for example, digitalizing the business case process, were just too big for us to absorb and look at, and would have taken all our time, all our money, and all our people to be able to go through it. Other things were just too knotty and complex, and when you started trying to unpick them, it wasn't possible to get to the outcome that you needed, or it became too interlaced with other parts of the business, and again, it would have consumed far too much time and resources. When we were asked to look at the business case work, we did 6 weeks of discovery work and then decided that it wasn't for us, moving the people and the resources out of that team towards a more favourable outcome. And we focused it around a parliamentary question, so a PQ, and a freedom of information, FOI, tooling. Within the space of 8 weeks, we managed to stand up and have a curated data set that we could use for comparing that tool. We went through the second iteration of that and went through a beta version before releasing it for wider use across defence. It's now seen as one of the standout government PQ FOI tools and is utilised across defence for being able to do that. But there was also another example of where we just didn't quite get that right. We were working with one of the project teams, and they were promising that they would deliver that overall moonshot that I described at the beginning. And the problem with that was that idea had my hopes in it, our hopes in it. It was going to solve a lot of our problems, and it was going to give solutions to not just ourselves sat there in the office, but to the frontline command and wider. It was going to be transformative across the enterprise. And we believed the hope. And because our hope was in it, we kept following the solution that was there. And therefore, we ploughed resources and money into that solution. It was only after a year of trying to get to an outcome, to try to get to just the launch pad and get something off, that we decided to pull the resources and the funding out of it and focused on something else. And again, that was a successful outcome, delivering a new desk booking tool, the most common used application across defence, delivering a new onboarding process, which sped up onboarding by over 85% for that, and creating a data plan against the dataverse across head office. Outcomes that mattered and could be delivered quicker, faster, and better. Thank you very much for your time listening. I'm quite happy to take some questions. We got just around about 10 minutes left. So if anyone's got any questions, I need to stick on a pair of headphones, it transpires. And hopefully then we can answer them.
Thank you, Tim. That was a great presentation and great lessons learned. I also work in public sector, and what kind of practical advice you can give? It's like 5 layers of hierarchy between me and the board, and it's like you don't have time, you don't have kind of understanding of the language they use. When you clearly know there's some people on your side, there's some like-minded people, but they kind of spread it across. It's hard to gather time. What are the practical advice to move on agenda when it's a lot of in the pyramid, a lot of layers of hierarchy? Thank you.
I think the hierarchy thing is a really difficult thing to try and cut through. So it's not on there as one of our lessons, but one of our key lessons, and the reason that project or program didn't work at the very end was the lack of senior engagement. So we had a lot of successful outcomes across the whole of the project and program that we were running, but the ones which are most successful were the ones which were sponsored. So they were sponsored by either a 4-star or a 3-star, and that gave you the ability to be able to unblock, and it gave you the ability to be able to unlock resources. And those two things are quite key. When you're blocked or you're stuck in a system, being able to unblock those using a senior, or being able to unlock resources and be able to move them towards the problem, as outlined on that third illustration. So I think if you're in a position where you haven't got seniors and they're not interested in what you're delivering, that's a concern. But it also can mean, gives you the ability to develop something a bit under the radar. And developing things under the radar is quite a good thing to be able to do. And one of the tools that we did, was looking at the onboarding or the processing of biasing that's in onboarding. And we developed an AI tool that looked at that. And again, we went to senior people and we asked them for sponsorship of this. And we said, this is a really great thing because when humans look at stuff, they've got real bias and people can write really great applications and the words don't correlate to how good they are in an interview or how good they are at a job. And how do we make sure that we get the best people through and remove some of those biasing? And we found a local person who could just sponsor that and develop a tool. So within the space of 8 weeks, we got to a minimum of our product. And then when we got a working product, we then got some time in a senior's diary and said, this is highlighting a problem. You've got a biasing problem, and this just highlights where that bias is. And it confirms when we got it right, and there isn't any bias, but it also confirms where you may need to go back and look at it again. To be very clear, that's not making any decisions using that AI tool, but it was highlighting where there could be a discrepancy between what the humans thought should be the ranking or stacking of a candidate versus what the AI tool would give you on that.
Thanks. You talked about the difficulties of lessons learned being put on the shelf. Have you since sort of found other ways in which lessons learned are best passed and transferred through teams and through leadership?
I think that's a really great question. We've really struggled with that. And I think one of the problems is that idea that we're not going to make the same mistakes that the previous people made, and that being de-risked by absorbing people in the team or speaking to people in the team. The best way of trying to do or trying to spot those issues is going back to those principles of stop delivering something really big, but actually try and deliver something smaller and then de-risk it as you go along. So while you're not actually applying some of those lessons, you are applying those principles of making sure you don't end up with a catastrophic problem at the other end. Some of the wider lessons we had was making sure that you had funding and the ability to be able to flex that funding within that program. And I think when you start talking about things like that, people then get interested in how we've managed that. So one of the things we did with our contractor was they were delivering 3 pieces of work on 3 separate contracts, and we combined them into one to manage them as a portfolio, and that gave us the ability to flex and veer and haul between that. And passing that on to someone else is a kind of non-intrusive lesson. So we're not saying you're doing it wrong, but actually you can improve. And those lessons are normally generally accepted, and they're also replicated across the business. When we say don't do X, we found it is a lot harder, and the best way of solving that problem was like, why don't you try doing X in a small thing, and you'll discover the same problem we had, which it just doesn't scale, or it doesn't work because this interface problem you've got at the moment. The final thing I'll just say on that is technology is moving at an incredible pace, and the tool that I spoke about just recently, that ability to be able to do analysis and look at candidates and do that ranking and stacking, that problem existed over 2 years ago as a problem, and was a problem which sat on my desk. And it wasn't a problem we could do. We couldn't do anything with it because the AI technology just wasn't good enough to be able to give you that. And technology's moved on, and 18 months later, we were in a position where we could revisit that. So sometimes what is true 2 years ago may not be true today because the technology's changed or the way in which we're doing things has changed.
I work in defence, and I guess I'm just sort of asking for, because I've only been here for 2 years, how do you not feel like hopeless at like this trying to get things changed? And like sometimes like the scale of defence can like trying to make things better and improve things feel a bit hopeless when you keep hitting like walls and like funding issues, commercial issues. Like how do you plough on, I guess is my question.
That's a really great question. I've been in defence as well, similar time, so I joined in August 23. I think the thing I've seen shape, I think there's two schools of thoughts. One is that kind of situation that you've perfectly described, where we're all a bit frozen and set in our ways. And we sometimes see the solution to that problem is lots of training. So we sort of sheep dip people through things like agile, and we go, they've been agilized, if that's such an adjective, and therefore they must be able to do things better, but we don't give them any of the tools. And we talk about enabling people, but when we say we've enabled our staff, what do we enable them to do? As in, have they got delegated authority to spend more money? Have they got the ability to be able to run a meeting? Are they taking things through to present it to a minister? Because if we haven't done that, we haven't really enabled people. We've just said we've enabled people. So that's, I definitely think, is still a problem, and we need to slowly unpick that. I'm hoping that, and this is obviously slightly nervously hoping, but because defence reform is huge, that defence reform does change things. But I think the thing we have seen change is two good things. So two external events have taken place. First of all is the war in Ukraine, and that's changed the way in which we're doing things. It's moved the dial to more of a, there's an urgency, a burning platform, we need to be doing stuff. And the Malloy drone is a great example of that. But with the intention of dropping in parcels to be able to give people aid, etc., but then was utilised or pivoted towards dropping bombs and being used by them. That then developed the 321 process out of that within DNS under the NAD group now. So that's 3 suppliers come in, they develop an MVP, then they go into a deployable under 2, and then they get a scalable 1 at 1. So I think we're seeing pockets of it. So external events, that's definitely helping us. And then the second big external thing is the change which we've seen under reform. And that changed from 20 people reporting to the Secretary of State, 20 departments, down to 4. And I think that is, again, seeing more of a portfolio management. But my advice, if you're trying to do stuff, is do it in small pockets. Back to that kind of prove it works, don't talk about it working. And I think if you can prove something works, it builds momentum. When you get momentum, people then start going, this is worth backing, rather than saying, well, if I did X, Y, Z. And I think my biggest advice is only do 1 or 2 things a year, which seems crazy, but if you deliver 2 things a year, probably delivering more than a big thing. And also build that momentum and build confidence. And as you get confidence, people want to come and work with you, but also give you money and funding to do it. So I don't think all hope's lost. It's definitely better than I've previously experienced it, but I think it's slowly changing, like any big organisation.
I think we have one last quick question.
Okay.
Hi, Tim. So in government organizations, there are a lot of legacy systems, and it's a challenge to decommission any one of them. And also when you're leading a project that's based around a data quality initiative, when you need to correct data at the source level, it's quite a challenge. People usually build another layer around the source systems instead of correcting data at the source. Have you led any such data quality initiatives, like in the form of a project, and what were the challenges and lessons learned, and how did you manage it?
That's like a really massive question for like 30-second answer. Legacy systems is a huge problem, and happy to chat about that afterwards. I think the key bit is, again, going back to that small thing, is trying to chunk things down and being able to work out, is that legacy system needed because it gives a dependency to something? And a lot of things in defence are that. Or can it be moved or migrated in? And there's possibilities in that way. And I think technology, I think the announcement of the secret community cloud with Google was a huge step forward. And we're going to see huge transformation in that space as well. Right, I think we're at the end of the time. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you a lot for coming along.